Hey guys, Porkchopper here, and in today's video we're going to look at an in-depth guide on being in the mid lane. I will cover the early, mid and late game, detailing what a mid laner should be doing and how to be efficient to give your team the best chance of winning. Thankfully there's a lot more for a mid laner to do on Monolith, so there's no better place to start than the early game. The first 10 to 15 minutes I would call the early game. This is the time for you to outfarm your opponent. Mid lane is now the only 1v1 lane in Monolith, meaning it's even more important to win. The best mid laners do multiple things. The first and most significant is to farm successfully. Getting last hits and not getting carried away on attacking your opponent laner is important. With junglers now having spent a lot more time in jungle and backing due to jungle minions dealing a lot more damage than they did in Legacy, you're going to get not much support from them for a gank, so the likelihood of you killing your opponent by yourself is very slim. Simply earning 3 to 6 more card points than them in the first 15 minutes is massive. This basically means they can't stop you at that point in the lane. Being able to outlast your opponent is key, and then pushing the lane correctly. For example, as Gadget I always use my ult when I unlock it to put extra pressure on them so I can go back and spend my card points. It may seem a little too much, but it gives you that just a bit more of an advantage. Being in the mid lane doesn't mean you can just sit back and farm, however. Wards are important given massive vision on the map. Even just putting your wards down and designing the enemies of theirs is a huge win. If you see the jungle across your lane heading to either left or right, let your team know. Rotating is another big factor. It only takes you 15 seconds to get to either lane from the middle, so you have to keep an eye on your opponent and let your team know if they're missing. Even if it's such a short time away from lane, you don't want to do it unless you know it will pay off. That time your opponent may stay in lane and earn more card points while you walk around the map for half a minute doing nothing. Not a good idea. I always make sure to never overpush my lane, keeping it on my side meaning I'm safe and may be able to deny the other mid laner farm. If I ever push my lane too much, simply going to a jungle camp or getting a river buff means you're not doing nothing. River buffs spawn at the 3-minute mark and are definitely worth denying your opponent laner off, which means you can stay in lane for longer. I see no point trying to push and damage the enemy tower early game anymore. They have a lot more health, especially in the first 7 minutes when they have additional armor. Just keeping the lane in your favour to farm is what's important. If you ever going to leave a lane to do, make sure you have pushed it far enough so the other laner can't counter push your lane. Now let's go into outdecking your opponent. This is what I call when you adapt to your opponent's deck and playstyle and counter it the best you can. The easy example of this is when the game begins seeing what they bought. If they don't have a mana or health potion, you can't use that to your advantage. If no health potion, simply use your abilities to keep poking them so they have to back or risk dying. With no mana potion, make sure they don't get the river bust, which increases your mana regen for a few seconds, is crucial too. If they are playing more aggressively, mostly build a damage, counter that. Same if they build in health early game. Adapting and countering to your opponent and learning how they play will help you in the long run. Do they rotate a lot, or do they use their ult more freely? Especially Gideon. I see too many panic and ult straight into a team fight, not waiting for the right moment and wasting it. Add this all up and you can figure your opponent out, counter them, control your lane, and hopefully out-farm them and the rest of the enemy team. This may seem a bit excessive, but it's what the best mid laners do. Now the game has progressed, as you can see if any card power difference is noticeable between you and your opponent. If you have it, you need to keep it. Start to push and harass them, making them teleport back while you can push their lane. Having to either take in the damage or pull their jungler into lane, either one is effective. If you really have a big lead, try to take them down, bully them, make them know they can't do anything in lane. Now you're going to want to rotate a lot more, seeing especially if the offlaners need help. Except for the jungler, you should be rotating the most. You can see me here even though it's only the first few minutes, as Gideon making sure we secure these early kills was a great starting point for this game. It will take time to know when and when not to rotate and letting your team know that. If they overextend expecting you to help them, that's on them, not you. Now let's look at the opposite end of it. You may have been ganked a few times and your tower is heavily low or pushed. The other mid laner has a good lead on you and you know in a 1v1 engagement they are going to win. What do you do? For one, keep your towers defended at all costs. If they're dumb and overextend, communicate to your team that you need to help to gank them. A single kill could turn the table in your favour to get back on top. Like the early game, purely focus on farm and pay attention to the map. Only leave your lane to help in a team fight or to farm in a jungle. Keep at this and you may frustrate them, knowing that they have a lead and they're not using it. While they have it, they may try to rotate a lot more. Tell your team, keep them safe and take the time to catch up. You are also the one with the best lane clear, and you need to know if a lane needs clearing. It should be your job mostly. It doesn't mean if someone keeps leaving their lane, you have to tidy it up each time. If a fight's going on, you have to go to that fight. The fact is, towers, funnily enough, aren't as important as they were. Winning a big team fight means you can push a lane so quickly it's worth it. Only go to lane which is clearly not being pushed in our favour, throw a few abilities down and it's cleared, and then back to the action. This sort of merges into the late game, where Monolith again, one team fight goes your way and it's almost game over. Most mid laners, Gadget, Gid and Howitzer all have AoE ults that can make or break that fight. Normally I use Teleblink on all my decks to give me that extra mobility, as I won't build much health. A team doesn't expect a Gideon to blink out of nowhere ult and then teleport out again. With the health and armor being weaker, you're not meant to be on the front lines. You can poke and finish off kills while doing great overall damage with your ult. Most mid laners have the ability to control the tempo of the fight. Gadget can keep enemies slowed down for your allies to catch up to get the kills. Howitzer has his landmine to push enemies away, and Bellica's drone, if placed correctly, can do massive amounts of damage to the enemy team. Like in the mid game, pushing your lanes in your favour while coming into those team fights to keep your team safe is what a mid laner does. You're not afraid to rotate, and once you have a lot of practice, you are able to know when to rotate or not. You're not meant to be in the front lines, as I said, and most of the time I like to sit near my carry and help them out if they ever get in a tough spot, as they're the ones you need to protect. They're the ones that are the big damage dealers. But anyway, that's a guide of the majority of what a good mid laner needs to do and think of all the time. It becomes second nature eventually. If you enjoyed this video, subscribing and checking out my other guides in deck build would be awesome. I even may after Christmas work on doing an offlane and jungle guide if this one is liked. So guys, I hope you all have a good Christmas and I'll see you next time.